So you got back and you finished your service. What did you do after the service?
I went back to Drew University, and I was on probation. I asked if I could come back. They required that I go to summer school and pass 2 courses, which I did. And then I went back to Drew. And my first semester back, I ended up in a rather weird position. I was on the dean's list, the honors list, which gave me unlimited cuts. I was on probation still, which didn't allow me to cut anything. So
you were at a place where you were allowed to miss some classes, but you couldn't actually miss any because you were on academic probation and the dean's list at the same time.
Yeah.
I wonder how often that has happened. You're both on academic probation and the dean's list. So when did you go back to CFO? Like I assume you probably hadn't gone to CFO while you were overseas in the military.
No.
Because I think that was pre-CFOI. I don't know if there were.
Yeah. I don't remember everything, but I did go in Cuyahoga Falls. Was that Ohio?
Is it Canuga? Kanuga?
Yeah.
Because I think that one, I'd have to look up where that one's at. But
I don't remember for sure, but that was after I got back. I went to. I kept going to CFO because that had been such an important part of my life that I kept going to CFO.
So even after you were back and at Drew University, you would still in the summers go attend camps?
Yeah. And at that time, they had started what they called Koinonia down near in Baltimore, Maryland, which was a full-time facility. And at the end of World War II, there was a program for helping these countries that had been involved in the wars in Europe. It was the something plan, Marshall Plan.
Yeah, the Marshall Plan.
And some of the people from the Marshall Plan would be sent to Koinonia because Koinonia taught you how to live in and blend with these cultures, as well as learning the teach one Laubach method of learning to speak in your language, learning to read in your language. And the reason that the government liked the people to go to Koinonia was because those people always fit in and were contributive in the countries where they were.
See, a lot of people may not realize if you listen to some of these older messages with Glenn Clark is his prayers, being able to teach how prayers, get your prayers answered and how to have faith and trust God had an impact on even leaders in the government. Like he would talk to FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And the heads of a lot of these major corporations he had influence with as well. And there's a book, if you can still find it, called The Third Front, where they talk about how a lot of Hitler's blunders came after they started praying and doing some of these things.
Yeah,
that people, if they see the genuine, real results of love and faith and prayer and answers, like if you're sick, if your spouse gets healed of a terminal disease, you're way more likely to listen. And Glenn Clark had that happen. People he prayed for healed. And that's what he was teaching people. And it had this impact on a whole generation of leaders in this country back then.
Yeah. And we've lost most of that. And that's what's being admitted now. is that we dropped that what was America. What was unique about being a republic and freedoms, and people just stopped caring and stopped maintaining the uniqueness of America.
So how did you? Because I know. So you went to Drew University, and then after that, you went to the University of Iowa,
Yes.
and that is where you met the most wonderful woman to ever exist in the world. Is that right?
God set me up again. Her brother, Bob, I was a section advisor in a dormitory, which meant I got room and board. Free.
So that's the way to go to college, right?
Free.
You didn't talk about Jim Cole, who got you to Iowa. Wasn't he the one that...
No, I was Bob Engel.
Oh, Bob Engel that got you to Iowa.
Yeah. And Bob Engel kept saying that there was no finer place on God's earth than Iowa.
Who's Bob Engel?
Well, he came out to Iowa. He became a professor in at the University of Iowa, and he's since died.
But you didn't... Wasn't he at Garwood's or something?
Wasn't he at what?
How did you meet him?
Oh. When I was at Drew and it had returned, the last year, some people that I had met at CFO, Dick Kreitz and his family, they got a chance to move into a home of one of the professors who was on sabbatical. And I think Bob and Beth Engel, somehow they ended up there too, but I got to meet them. And what I really wanted to do was go to California, but I started figuring it out, and I didn't have enough money to go to California and return. And so I came to Iowa as a compromise.
And met Miss Helen Leach.
Yes.
Well, she wasn't Helen Leach then.
No. Well, anyway, her brother was in one of the residents in my section. And we got to doing some things together. And on this particular occasion, another friend of ours, his father was in the hospital, and because I had the car, we were going to take him up to the hospital to visit his father. And but we stopped first at Burge Hall in Iowa City because Bob's parents were coming. And they were there, and this pretty girl was there.
I'm assuming that was Mom, right?
And she was wearing a blue outfit.
It was green.
Bluish green.
Bluish green. We'll give them that. We're guys. Listen.
And the only time in her life
I wouldn't say that.
well, I would.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She felt the urge to buy her mother a little gift with her mother's money. And So she did. And while I was there, she gave it to her mother. And it was just one of those whammy things that everything I wanted in a girl would be a girl who had a good, solid, loving relationship with her parents. And the parents would be nice. And it was all in a package. And God says, "You got it?" So I didn't know if she'd go out with me. And so I made up a thing that Bob had already met Marlene, and we were going out to Spaghetti Works or something. And I called Helen, and I said, "Let's just fool him, fool your brother." I mean, I was searching for any excuse.
He was sneaky.
Uh-oh.
I was searching for any excuse I could find why she would say yes to. And she said yes to that. So that was our first date. And
then you accidentally took her to see the movie Psycho because you didn't know what it was about.
Well, that was a little later.
But she still married you.
oh,
So after you got married, I understand you had an interesting place to take her for your honeymoon. Where was that? Besides the Wisconsin Dells.
well, yeah. I wanted to introduce her to the CFO. And so I insisted that as part of our honeymoon, we would go to the Iowa CFO. And that introduced her to CFO.
And I didn't know what CFO was, but I was in love, so I agreed to do it.
But it stuck with it. So what do you remember, Mom, those speakers, the first couple speakers are there? I think it was Star Daly and you said Louise Eggleston?
Louise Eggleston.
So,
They talked like no one I'd ever heard. I grew up in the United Methodist Church, and I hadn't heard talk like that.
So-
Louise Eggleston just tells story after story after story. And Star Daly had come out of prison and became such a wonderful person and CFO speaker that they were just amazing.
what was kind of, can you think of something that was probably different between them and like a normal church speaker?
Star Daly's book that tells us a life story is called Love Can Open Prison Doors.
Yes, that was impressive.
Did he share that testimony or part of it?
Oh, I'm sure he did, but I don't remember exactly. But anyway, when we went, we were a day late going there, and I didn't want to stay because we got there and found out we got the wrong time, and it was a day late, and I wanted to leave. But he talked me into staying, and so we stayed. And I was glad we stayed because it did turn out to be a wonderful camp.
So did you keep going to the Iowa CFO or keep going to CFO every year after that? Or
Yes, we did.
so you got hooked the first time?
Yes, we went to Iowa CFO every year.
So what did you first think of things like, because Dad went when he was a teenager, so it's a little more, you don't mind it as much, but like you were already an adult. So what did you think of things like devotion and motion and the creatives? Because it's unusual. That's one of the unusual flavors of CFO.
But that's what made it so wonderful. And then everybody just loved each other. The people were so friendly, very, very friendly.
And that is one of the things, if you read some of what Glenn Clark put down, is one of his main things he said is we drop all denominational backgrounds, all religious backgrounds, all creeds, all races, all this, and you would just come together as Christians in love and just learn from each other on how to pray and get your prayers answered.
Yes, and once I'd been there, I was hooked and wanted to go back again. So it's just a wonderful place to go.
So did you go every year?
Yes. We went every year to the Iowa camp, and then we did that.
Then we got
Oh, then we moved
Was it
to
Peterson?
to Peterson, and it was closer to go to the
Minnesota.
Coronas, the Minnesota camp, and it was also cheaper. And by then we had how many children? 3 or 4 children, and it was cheaper to go to Minnesota. And so we started going to Minnesota.
So it's filling in there too. At this point, Dad had gone to seminary and become an ordained Methodist minister as well.
Yeah.
What were you ordained? What was it?
It was a Methodist.
What school were you ordained through?
University of Dubuque.
University of Dubuque.
Yeah.
Because that's why they were moving around, is because when the bishop says he's moving to a different church, he's moving to a different church.
Yes, so we started out and we were living.
Was that Lost Nation, Iowa?
Well, we lived. Where was the first church you were in?
Waterloo. Oh, no.
No.
At, I served a couple.
Wyoming?
No.
Royal?
No. What were those 2 little churches? Well, when he was in seminary, he served these little churches.
So
and
being
we
near
lived
Dubuque
there
then,
for like a month or something. And then we moved to Lost Nation because I got a job teaching school in Lost Nation.
So you take Mom to her first CFO. First CFO is with Star Daly and Louise Eggleston there.
Yeah.
Mom gets hooked. And you guys, as you start pastoring different churches, you started attending Iowa CFO. And then when you moved up into the Peterson area, it was closer to Coronas. So you kind of started taking the family there, which is the first CFO that I kind of remember being at. I have bits and pieces in my memory of that.
You were 3 months old when you
3
went.
months old. So how did you really start getting involved in these camps a bit more at that point? Because I know you've served as chairman of the Iowa CFO a couple of times.
Well, what happens is each council ring member serves for a term of 3 years. And they have to choose who's going to be the next council ring member. So it's simply a matter that they approached us and asked us if we would be council ring members.
Did you
in Coronas?
Yeah.
Were you
Were we in Iowa too, or just?
Well, and that happened in Iowa too.
So were you recording any camps at this time, or that hadn't started yet, right?
No. The way I got into recording, this is going back to the full gospel, is that I got a tape duplicator because I wanted to spread the tapes out and give them away to people.
So at this point, what tapes did you have? Like, is it tapes where you just you've gotten some tapes from like old CFO tapes from somewhere? Where were those from?
These were tapes that I personally recorded, and there were tapes that somehow or other we acquired. We bought Hagen tapes and Copeland tapes, and we shared those. We were unwilling to give our originals out for people to listen to.
But you operated it kind of like a lending library, right?
Well,
or you give copies away with permission and.
Then, because the equipment cost so much, I took it upon myself. At the same time, about that time, we got invited to the full gospel, didn't we?
Yeah.
So this would probably be what, in the mid 70s?
It'd be when we were in Peterson.
I don't remember that it started in Peterson.
Correctionville?
In Correctionville's when
you started recording the Glow meetings.
Yeah, and the full gospel. I asked the full gospel if I could record their meetings.
So this is the Full Gospel Businessmen's.
Yes.
Okay.
And they said yes, they wanted someone to. So I would record the meetings and sell the tapes. And I would have the duplicator there so that I could duplicate the tapes and sell them right there. Did the same thing with the Women's Aglow. In fact, I got elected to be on the board of the Women's CF Glow.
Women's Aglow?
Women's Aglow. And there's some picture that used to hang up there that they gave to us when we left Correctionville to come to Milo.
What was the picture?
It's the blue picture with an angel.
Oh, yeah. I know what one. I don't know where it is.
Hang up there.
Yeah.
The quote from Revelation. Where did we get the picture of Jesus?
It was a wedding present from one of the churches you were serving. Monmouth and Baldwin.
Oh,
I think that's the name. That's the name you couldn't remember earlier.
Monmouth and Baldwin, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's when he
Of the church, of the place where Dad pastored.
pastored when he was a student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so like all this time too, like you're starting to record things then in Correctionville, like Women's Aglow meetings, Full Gospel Businessmen's. I was at Rhema where I went, we called it Fig Bemiffy because it was just kind of funny to say. So you started recording then, and then to try and help it pay for itself, you started. That's what you were kind of doing to help.
Yeah, because the sales were sufficient. There would be many a night that I would come home from the Full Gospel or Women's Aglow with money for groceries. I mean, things were that tight that.
Well, they didn't.
We had a big family.
It was a big family, and being a rural Methodist pastor did not pay that well. But I remember as a kid many times where like we'd be. All I remember is, I didn't know for sure. I knew we didn't have much because we weren't eating that much. But suddenly somebody would show up with tables full of groceries.
That happened the year that we left the pastorate. It came to a couple weeks before Christmas, and we were behind in our utility bills. The shelves were empty. We had no groceries. We had no Christmas presents. By a week later, the grocery shelves were full. We had bought all of our presents, and all the bills were paid.
But your dad helped with part of that, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because he lived with us and he would buy us a lot of stuff. But I remember that time because then I said, if God comes through this time, I'll never doll him again.
Then January came.
January came. But I remember Dad. So you said though, I remember you telling me before that there was a time where, so you're starting to record these meetings, starting to build this library of tapes that you're lending out and duplicating, but then God said something through your mouth that you were not expecting in a meeting one night.
Oh, you can have them for free.
Yeah.
First you said you can have them at cost. Then you said they can have them for free.
I remember you told me,
and
well, that was very generous.
And how can you make money that way?
And you can't make money not charging people for what you're doing. But I remember, like, as the CFOs we do as a kid, when you'd record them, you'd have the tapes for sale, but you'd say, if you don't have the money for the tapes, we'd rather have you have them than not have them. So your one rule was you can have the tapes for free as long as you agree to share them with somebody else. Yeah. And that was your one caveat there was sharing the messages. And I think as far as where Shepherd Ministries came about and where the CFO Classics Library is at, I think that kind of sums up where I don't care how if download, share, just share away. We want them shared.
Well, the library really grew. There was the Lord's Own Tape Ministry of Daniel and Becky Butler. And I don't remember how I got a hold of the names, but I did start borrowing some tapes from them and listening to them and, making my own copies.
Because they'd been on before you, so they had some of the older speakers on.
Yeah, in fact, one of the messages I just transferred was a reel to reel where Roland Brown actually is mentioning the Butlers and their tape ministry and to support them in this thing where they were recording this camp in Minnesota, I think it was.
Yeah. But just at the point where they could no longer deal with it, I think Becky hurt her back, and her husband, Daniel, was working as a janitor in the school in order to make enough money to pay the help that they had to fulfill the orders. And then they just stopped and sent out a letter asking if anyone felt led to do it. And they wanted to sell it. But I didn't have money. And no money came. But we still felt that this was part of God's plan, that we get the library. And it went for a year, and they thought they had made a deal with somebody who had come down to visit them and taken some tapes back with him. But they never heard from him again. So.
And they were desperate, weren't they?
Yeah, they were desperate. And they wanted $13,000 for the library. Well, finally they agreed on $8,000. And then they waited for me to send them the money. And Becky would call, and those Florida rains would be coming in, and the leaks in that porch area were getting horrendous, and they were spreading plastic up to the ceiling where the leaks were and funneling it out through the windows. And still no money.
Because you didn't have any money come in yet either to give them, right?
Yeah. The only money I had was, I tried at raising some money, and I raised just enough to pay for the postage for a letter. And Becky had said that they would not give us the mailing list until we had purchased the library. But then one day the mailing list arrived, and I knew exactly what we were to do with it. And I wrote a letter, and I explained what the Butlers were facing and how much they had devoted to that library. And I asked people to send them a letter of thanks, and if they could, to enclose a gift for them.
Did she know that she had sent you the mailing list, or?
I don't know if she knew that. Well, she must have known it. But I don't know why she changed her mind and sent it. But, well, I know why.
It was God.
It was
It was
God's
God.
plan. And she called a week later after I sent that letter out. And by the way, the money I had been able to raise was just enough to pay for the postage.
To send out all those letters
Yeah,
on her mailing list.
yeah. A week later, she called and she said, "What did you do?" They had received $13,000. I think that the total they got in was like 13,500.
Wow.
More, they had lowered their price down to 8,000, but God wanted them to have the full amount.
And this was back in 85, 86? I'm trying to remember. I remember being a kid, and I have a vague memory of sending out letters, helping seal envelopes of some kind.
I don't remember.
That was the old dot matrix printer with the
Oh yeah.
holes in the side.
Oh, I remember, because it would run down the stairwell as you're printing out all these letters, and we'd have to tear them apart and put them in the. But
So,
because this point that was when you had incorporated the Shepherd Ministries in order to for the lending library and the recording you were doing. So this is Shepherd Ministries at that time, wanting to acquire
yes.
the Lord's Own Tape Ministry from Becky and
Yeah.
Daniel.
And our thought originally was that this would be a way to generate some income for ourselves, but that was not to be.
Now, at that time, cassettes started to drop out of.
Well, reel to reel.
Oh, they're old reel to reels too. Yeah, a lot of theirs were
Yeah.
on reel to reel.
They had just started to convert to cassette, but most of their tapes were reel to reel.
Yeah, in fact, part of that is what I'm doing right now. A lot of these are reel to reels that haven't been heard in 50 years.
Yeah.
And
So anyway, they immediately shipped the tapes up. Well, we had no place to put them, so we talked, or we asked permission from Pastor, I don't recall his name. But anyway, to put them in that building
In what building?
where we started going to church.
oh, Pastor Dice.
Yeah. And so we put them all there temporarily. And that was until, another part of the story is that we were looking around at available houses. We just had this,
Because at this point, you'd felt led to retire from pastoring.
well, God had said to us, leave now or you never will. And I understood what that meant, because they were talking about sending us to a single point charge. The Correctionville charge comprised around 600 people. So it was in 4 churches, because this was the time when we were uniting with the EUBs. And we had an EUB church in Correctionville. So, no, I was just wondering how that assignment of a 4-point charge, how that would compare with, say, a charge in the city.
So a 4-point charge meant you had 4 different churches that you would travel to that you were in charge of as the pastor.
Yeah.
And single point means you're basically in one church and responsible for one church. And those tend to be the longer you're going to be there till you retire, possibly, charges,
Yeah.
right?
But we were actually being sent to what would have been comparable to a 600-member single church, except it was in 3 parts. And but the district superintendent, there was a problem that had to be dealt with for these churches. And I struggled till I finally got the district superintendent to understand what it was. And he immediately recognized, once he recognized, he immediately accepted the plan I had for how to deal with it. But there was a problem that I could not stay here.
Yeah, so this final church you were at, there were some interpersonal problems that you figured out the way through, but it would mean you would probably have to leave to avoid causing problems with the church.
Well, I would have problems because some people would blame me for what had happened.
Yeah.
But the district superintendent then started talking about a church in eastern Iowa, a single-point church.
Because he liked the discretion at which you handled the situation, right?
I don't know what his motivation was.
But it would have been closer to my parents too if we'd moved there.
But the thing was, it's, what every pastor dreams of is finally making it to a single point charge and only having one church to work with. And I could see immediately that would immediately open the door to maybe even becoming a district superintendent or something like that, because that was moving in that direction. But God had said, leave now or you never will. So we'd gone around town and we looked at all the homes that were for sale.
Well, because you'd made the decision then to obey God and retire and leave them at, leave the pastorate.
But we wanted to stay in Milo because we had children in high school and Debbie was a senior.
So all this is going on at the same time. Now your Tate ministry's been growing, but yet you're giving everything away, so it's not a big moneymaker for you. And now you are acquiring the Butler's Lord's Own Tate ministry as part of Shepherd Ministries with money you didn't have.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So you're an interesting. So basically you're setting yourself up with no job. We lived in a parsonage, so we'd have no place to live. But you also felt led to acquire this other ministry at the same time.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. God doesn't often make sense when he tells you to do stuff.
And we wouldn't move because of Debbie and,
Yeah.
all you kids.
Like Dave was a senior. And
Well, the thing is, we knew that Debbie was a praying girl. And we just knew that she'd asked God to stay here so she could graduate as valedictorian.
Which she did.
So
we thought we'd stay a year till we got her out of school. But then the next one was Michelle, who was so shy. Well, we couldn't move her.
from all of her friends.
Yeah. Well, because then she'd be a junior in high school. And then Kathy was coming behind. We didn't want to move her either. So that's why we're still here.
And then your only shot was me because I was 6 years behind Kathy. But by that point in time.
And then we thought we'd definitely leave then because Michael would be all right because he was young enough, but we never did. By then I had a decent job in Indianola and we're still here.
But back to
there's still another side to the story. And that is, going back, we looked around town at the available houses. We picked the one that we wanted. We were going to need to divide a basement room up into 3 bedrooms to do it. And the little garage we would make into my office where we would have the tapes. And that was before we got the tape library.
So it was before the viewers.
That was while we were still living in the parsonage.
Before you'd actually, yeah. So you're searching for the house to go to after you left the parsonage.
Yeah, and before we knew anything about the Lord's own tape ministry.
I remember you telling me how comfy that new house that you saw was going to be because a thick carpet for my bare feet would be great.
The one we didn't get.
Yes.
Well, then, finally, in a desperate thing, because we didn't have anything, and God never came through with a down payment, I said, God, we're doing what you told us to do. We need a down payment.
We need a house.
And Helen was ready to set up camping in the park.
Yeah, I was afraid we were going to have to pitch tents in the park.
But the people in this house...
The house where we're sitting right now.
Yeah. They were willing to get out in one weekend. And we got to move in the next weekend. And some people from the church came in and painted the walls. And so I was sitting in the office after all of this.
We got now into this house that wasn't the one you wanted.
No, and I didn't even like it. I didn't want it. I thought, well, we'll just stay here a couple of years because I don't really like this house.
And it was after then you'd gotten the tape library and all those tapes had been shipped up to us.
Yes. Which became dividers for your rooms.
Yes. My 3 of us children split the upstairs of this house, and tape shelves were our walls with sheets hanging on them. So all the tapes you got moved out of storage and we were able to put in the upstairs of this house.
So I asked God, why didn't we get the house we wanted? And I heard a voice. And I think there may have been one other time that I actually heard the voice speaking. But I heard this was the only house available that had enough room for the library, for the tapes. And you think, God, why couldn't you have told us beforehand?
He doesn't operate that way.
That's the story of why we're in this house.
Yeah, and they're still here today, which is 40 years later.
Yeah, and everything is going on. I mean, you are now putting the tapes on the internet, which is what God wanted.
Well, let's step back for a bit before we get to there, because then, in the chain of this, so now you've acquired the library. Had you started already recording for CFO camps at that time?
Right.
Like, when did you start actually? Because I know you recorded at Coronas. I remember holding a mic up there for you for some reason.
I'm trying to remember about Coronas. I used to sit with what's his name back in the control room off the edge of the stage. I think we recorded there off of the...
Yeah, you would sit to the side of the stage to do your recordings, because I remember sitting there with you a couple of times.
Was anyone recording it before that?
I don't recall, but there had been people recording.
Because I have some messages that I've transferred that are from the mid-'70s, so I didn't know when you stepped in, because like the early '80s is what I had a memory of.
Yeah.
We went to Coronas when we moved to Correctionville.
Or Peterson. No, Waterloo. Wait, where?
And we went to Colorado one year.
I remember. I was a teenager when you went to Colorado one year.
But what we found was that the different camps who had people recording, that those people were now retired from recording. And so we stepped in so that there's a guy who had been recording the Iowa camps, and his name slips me now. And I think the same would have been true with Coronas. But I stepped in at the point where those people stopped recording, and just like the Full Gospel and the Aglow, they were looking for people to record.
So this is probably early 80s, because some of the masters I played in were like Rev Ev preaching at Coronas, and it had your Shepherd Ministries or tape library like address on the master. Thank you for listening to the CFO Classics Library podcast, brought to you by Shepherd Ministries Incorporated. To learn more about the CFO Classics Library, please visit our website at www.cfoclassicslibrary.org. To learn more about the Camps Farthest Out and how they can help you grow in your walk with God, or to find a camp near you, please visit their website at cfonorthamerica.org.